Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. This past weekend marked the 12th annual Everything Equine and Canine event in Essex Junction. The two-day event drew thousands for entertainment and education. One of the main attractions at the event was a world-renowned trainer and speaker from the Australian Equine Behaviour Centre. Andrew McLean is an expert in the field of equine psychology, behaviour and training. He's received Australia's highest award for science, and his Equine Behaviour Centre is one of the most respected in the world, using evidence-based training methods to train horses and riders of all disciplines. It is a pleasure to welcome Dr. McLean along with Vermont's own equine expert, Dr. Betsy Green of UVM Extension. Thanks so much for being with us.
Glad to be here.
Pleasure.
Now, Betsy, you're one of the founders of Everything Equine and Canine and are responsible for the event's educational programs. How did you get to know Andrew?
I first met him in Sweden in 2010
Of course you did.
at the International Society for Equitation Science meetings. And it was great. I've met him and come to know him and his wife Manuela since then at those meetings. It's just great to see. He would do some demonstrations and presentations and just get to talk to him between meetings and find that there were a lot of great things that I could bring to Vermont.
And so what prompted you to ask him to come all the way to Vermont?
Well, as I was talking to him at meetings in Kentucky last summer, I said, you know, there are a lot of people said we should bring him over. I said, okay, we could bring him over. So we got folks that were willing to say, okay, if we have him make several stops, then we can bring him over here and get a lot of things done. And from my point of view, you know that I focus on stewardship and health and welfare of the horse and rider and safety. And so all of the things that he puts into practice in his work with science behind it, it's just very exciting to bring that to Vermonters.
Exactly. Well, Andrew, as Betsy mentioned, you wear a lot of different hats. How do your experiences as a competitive rider, trainer, and researcher help your work as an animal behaviorist?
Well, in a great and most interesting way, because the problems that they all experience have generally been answered in the past by tradition and a lot of good information, but also a lot of folklore. So the scientific side really enables me to get into that world with the understanding of science behind me, so I can help explain and help them get to their goals.
And so let's talk about your method of training and behavior modification. How do you describe it, and how did you develop it?
Well, I first developed it simply because I started asking questions. I was eventing at a high level and I had a scholarship to pay for more education. But I had this enduring question that most of the coaches that I met around the world couldn't answer, and that was, how does the horse learn these things? You know, exactly what are the mechanisms of learning? Because I really wanted to know that. It seemed to me that, like an engineer, if you tap into that, you'll be able to glean the right answers if you know the real background of every behaviour. And that's really was my starting point.
And so it's not just repetition?
No, it's not at all. No, it's understanding that there are various ways animals learn things, and if you tap into those learning processes, you really expedite learning, because learning and training are much the same sort of thing. Training is just what we do to hijack learning in the animal.
And so there are terms that are used, classical, habituation. Can you give our viewers a definition of what these mean in the training program?
Yeah, sure. I mean, really, my training program just simply centres on three main learning streams. Habituation just means where the animal gets used to certain things in its environment, so it includes desensitising horses to all the things they're scared of, and they sure as hell are scared of a lot of things.
Yeah, there's a whole dictionary of things horses are afraid of.
Yeah, that's right. And it also includes getting the horse used to things like the girth around its body, all the paraphernalia we use on the horse. Operant conditioning is basically using rewards and consequences to enable us to meet our training goals. For example, we want to teach the unbroken horse to go forward, to stop, to turn, and then we want to refine these into the more esoteric aspects of dressage. And classical conditioning, the third one, is just simply about the hints and signals. It's about labelling a behaviour with a voice command or some other kind of postural command, or it could even be a very light rein aid or something like that.
And so I know you also work with other animals, including elephants. Can you apply these sort of same methods to other animals as you do with horses, like even dogs?
Not only dogs, also human beings, partners.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, now it's getting
Yeah,
interesting.
you can get whatever you want that way, so long as they're not aware of the process.
doing.
Yeah, that's right. But no, it is. You see, learning in animals is really ubiquitous. Animals right across the whole spectrum of the animal kingdom learn in the same kind of way. I mean, operant conditioning, classical conditioning has been seen also in invertebrate animals, so small slugs and insects and things. So the basic learning processes are the same throughout the animal kingdom. So it wasn't difficult for me to translate one to the other. I basically crossed out the word horse and wrote elephant and took off to India, to Nepal actually. Of course there are differences. There are, where we use the signals and how we use them, they're slightly different. And some animals have a higher tolerance for mistakes, like dogs do. Your timing can be slightly wrong with a dog. And with an elephant, you can be slightly wrong too. They're very intelligent, but that's at a cost because they can get a little bit angry because they're not a domestic animal. But with horses, you've got to be right on time. Really, timing is the most critical element of horse training.
And so horse owners know that a fairly common problem is the issue of shying, and we have a video clip that addresses your take on that issue, so let's take a look at that.
Now, just looking at habituation techniques, habituation is where animals learn not to react to fearful stimuli. It's actually about learning not to react to stimuli, but for our purposes, it's fearful stimuli. It's worthwhile thinking about what rewards fear, because people will give you so many complicated answers why horses react to fearful stimuli. But there's only two reasons. One is that their legs go fast, and two is that the legs go far. That's all. That's all there is to it. It just rewards it. So when someone says, "Oh, my horse is really scared of watering cans," all I think is, well, you must have let his legs go fast and far. Because it's really about distance, you see. If the animal shies this far and this fast, he'll probably do it again. But if he shies this fast and this far, he'll definitely do it again. There's something about increasing distance that makes the animal learn that fear response. So that's what we've got to do, is have better controls with our aids. That's why in the old German text they always talk about horses that shy and do things like that are just not on the aids. We need to make our aids deeper, and we can do that with, just...
Well, that sounds like a good example. Can you give me sort of an example of how to do that? Let's use the watering can as an example. The horse jumps away from it, so how do you get the horse not to jump away?
Well, you probably can't get him to not jump away, but what you can do is at least have some control of how far and how fast he goes, and that's really by having more deeply ingrained, learned responses of stopping and slowing, so that if the horse goes to jump away, if you use your reins and ask him to stop now, and he doesn't, he grabs the bit and keeps on running, that really is a sign that the learning of the slowing signals is not very deeply ingrained. So we do more transitions like that and teach the horse to be able to stop and also turn, and then we can start to use very small, low-grade effects of that watering can, where we get a bit closer and just reward him and stop and stand and look at it, and then get a bit closer, and then maybe move away because that's our decision but not his decision.
And this takes time, though.
All training takes time. I mean, there are really no miracles. I think that's the most important thing that horse people recognise, because so many of the things that you see in exhibos give you the impression that there's some miracles that you can do, but there are no miracles. It takes time to do it well. It takes time.
Can you teach an older horse new tricks? In other words,
Absolutely.
if they've been used to being trained one way, can you train them the other way?
Absolutely. I think one of the myths is, it's the same with people, is that we get to an age where we can't learn, and that's just simply not true. There may be some baggage in the road that stop us learning, and some previous history, but nonetheless, or that maybe inhibit us our progress. But our brain is definitely open to do that, and so is the horses. So I've found horses over 20 years of age that have never been able to stop from a light aid in their lives, apparently, can stop now if you train them correctly.
And so, Betsy, we saw one of Andrew's DVD clips. What are some of his other resources that you found valuable?
Well, he has several books out, and the academic horse training is really nice because it actually gives a lot of the background and reasonings behind. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about him and his methods, because he does say, no, you can't take the shortcuts, but you have the ability and capabilities to do it right if you learn what's going on behind the behaviors and such. And so that, to me, it opens it up to everybody, whether they're experienced or not, to actually do the right thing, so to speak, and get a better result with their horse, and then they're happier and their horse is happier.
And so let's take a look at another short clip. This one involves working with a rider to get past the never-ending leg cues.
When people have a lazy horse, they tend to just say with their leg, push him up a bit, and then he goes flat again. It's better if you do something much more obvious to the horse, that the moment you feel, Beck, you want to use your leg aid, don't squeeze him quicker, make him trot. Go up one whole gait every single time. Good boy. Okay, do half a circle or quarter and back to walk. That's it. Now every time you feel you've got to help him, don't help him. Because every time you help him, it poisons the cue. It poisons the leg aid. Good boy. And that's true for any gait. If you're trotting, just give dressage away for the moment, and just, if you're trotting, just say, right, we're cantering. Any moment, but don't help him with your leg. The rule of training any animal is that you want to have just one signal for one response and not have to keep repeating it. You know, you don't want to have to keep saying to the dog, sit, 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 sit. You don't want to have to say it that many times. You want him to be really sharp and just stay obedient. So that's one way.
Well, what would you say is the biggest difference between your methods and other horse training protocols?
I think the main difference is that I focus particularly on the origin of these problems and looking at each single learned response rather than just the problem as it is. For example, if there are problems in various movements, I see movements as a conglomeration of many responses. So I like to pull it all apart and lay all these parts on the table and analyse them, check them out one by one and retrain them. And that's really what puts everything back together. So, a lot of people say, well, there's really nothing new under the sun, and in some ways that may be true, but there are new ways of understanding things, and that's what science can give us, is a really interesting way of looking at problems by separating them into their component parts.
Now, you travel around the world giving demonstrations and so forth, and some of them we just saw. What are some of the most common questions you get from people?
Well, common questions I get, I think probably tension is one of the biggest problems that people find with horses. I mean, there are lots of examples of everywhere I go. There's bucking, rearing, shying, bolting, all those sorts of things. But tension is a really enduring problem for a lot of people, because what's happening in the performance horse world now, and we see this particularly in dressage, but we also see it in show jumping and eventing, and that is the horses are getting hotter and hotter in that sense that they're becoming more sensitive. And sensitive animals tend to become hyperreactive very quickly, and so they maintain their confusions in attempts to run away by being, for example, just tense as you're riding them. They want to trot faster. If you let the reins go, they'll go faster. And so that's probably the most commonly occurring problem, is just dulling down the hyperreactivity of horses so that they become calmer to ride.
Mm-hmm. Is that being consistent with your cues, or is that just working them?
It's really just working them, and it's looking at various aspects of training, like self-carriage, and teaching people that what self-carriage is about. And this is true for all horses, even race horses, that you should be able to let the reins go, and the horse should keep its own speed, its own direction, and no change in its body posture, like its head and neck shouldn't change when you let those things go. And that's good training. I often say to people, if you tell me you've trained a bird to sit on your arm, I want to see you let go of its wings. It's not good enough to be just hanging on to its wings and tell me it's perfectly trained. So it's the same thing for the horse. So I'm trying to introduce this more and more into the FEI as well, into competitions where people let go of the reins for a couple of strides in every movement and demonstrate that the horse is actually trained to do these things and not just held in a wrestling match by the rider.
If people are interested in finding out more about your work or your training center, what should they do?
They can visit our website, which is www.abc.com.au, and they can also, through that website, contact me. We have a lot of staff, and we give out a lot of advice.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thanks
Thank
for
you
coming in
very
again,
much.
Betsy.
Yes.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.